Okay, Jeff Peel in the house. Jeff, I was saying you can put your lovely new book on your bookshelf, and you're telling me it's not real. What? Is there anything
No,
real these days?
no, it's not a virtual backdrop as such, but it's printed, so it's wallpaper. So it comes in a whole pile of strips, and you stick it onto the wall. So I'm giving insider podcaster information here to the general public. So you can order it on Amazon.
Oh, for goodness, it just gets worse on Amazon, even worse.
Yeah,
And that was
so
me thinking you're so well read with all these books. I was
I
getting kind of
know.
envious of this backdrop.
So some of the books are fascinating as well. There's a lot of cat books. There's this one is The Church of Scotland by Hetherington.
There might be a message in there.
Yeah, Encyclopedia of World Art. I don't know if these books ever existed, but they're very, very good and rendered sort of three-dimensionally, so they look incredibly real.
Well, we're going to have a book that does exist very soon. I don't know where you're going to put it. It won't be, you'll have to get a pretendy one to stick on your bookshelf. But you have been writing, you've been creative. And anybody who's ever listened to you speak, it's obvious after a very short time that you know what you're talking about. You've a different kind of aspect to the way you look at things. I really can't wait to read this book, but you're going along the fiction lines now. Will you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Well, yeah. Obviously, I've been writing like you, writing and podcasting for the last probably 4 or 5 years. Since the craziness really kicked off in March 2020. I don't think I started immediately, but it was just a few months after the lockdown meltdown, and there's a limit, I think, to how much reach you can achieve, and also what you can say. I think I've done a lot of interviews with like Sonia Poulton, for example, and sometimes she alludes to the fact that in order to maintain her YouTube presence, there are certain things that certain parameters that she has to work within, and there are certain words that she's not even allowed to use, and therefore I think the easiest way or the easier way to get some key information out or perspectives or opinions out is via fiction. And a book that really influenced me, given the fact that I come from the kind of libertarian right, in fact, I would have categorized myself before 2020 as socially liberal, but fiscally conservative or libertarian. But the only way really to get information out in this new era is to use fiction. And what inspired me was a book that I read many years ago called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And obviously, it's kind of cliche that anybody on the right has read Atlas Shrugged. But still, in my view, it was an incredible work of fiction. It was a very, very long book, obviously. But it was a life-changing book from my perspective. One, in terms of the way it was written, but also the way she used characters and characterization to get across her point. And to some extent, this is a sort of homage to Atlas Shrugged, in that it's the type of book I think, or I would hope, that Ayn Rand would have written, certainly the topics that she would have written about had she lived. Namely the loss of liberty, the loss of freedom, state overreach, coercion, control. And I've done that through 4 main characters. The girl in the front with the very shapely bottom.
She's got a great bottom. It's up there with
the
Middleton bottom. What was her name? Pippa Middleton's bottom, isn't it?
She is one of the 4 main characters, Anna Sussex, and she it enters the book quite early, and incidentally, every chapter of the book is narrated by one of the characters that appears in the book, not just the 4 main characters, but other sort of side characters, if you like. And but Anna Sussex is, if you like, the heroine of the book. And there's one particular chapter where she visits Capitol Hill, and she hasn't packed properly. She didn't expect to be visiting Capitol Hill. And the only thing she's packed is this white mini dress that was bought by her boyfriend, one of the other main characters as well, who's an Indian coder and developer who came from Kerala in southern India and landed in Silicon Valley. And the two of them met by a strange set of circumstances. So the book is told through their eyes and the other two main characters as well. And what I tried to do was to sort of adopt a style, which is quite in certain. Ayn Rand referred in her book to a grandiloquent style. In other words, there's a lot of speeches and podcasts and sort of statements to the nation, if you like. So that's how the narrative is conveyed. So I make use of characters like yourself, Aisling, where, we have podcasters and people from the alternative media pop up and so on, Bitcoiners, so and the tech bros as well. So it's really an attempt on my part to, in the style of well, hopefully in that sort of similar style to that adopted by Ayn Rand, to convey certain concerns that I have about, obviously, and that you're very familiar with, about how the world is progressing or not progressing, depending on your view.
Well, we know with the publishing world, it's kind of like there's a social credit score system. And that's why reading books these days has become so thoroughly unpleasant. It's like watching movies or even watching soaps on the TV. Everything has gone woke now, and there's always some kind of message to whack you over the head with. Is it difficult for somebody like you to get it published, or is it self-publishing, or how does it work? I mean, how does somebody who does not want to play with this kind of woke social credit score system get their voice heard or get published?
Well, it's funny. This is my second book, my first novel, but I published a really turgid and boring book many years ago, 20 years ago. And it was a book, interestingly, on technology, a certain sort of esoteric area of technology that I won't bore you with. But it was published by a mainstream publisher. And I refer to that because obviously these days it would be impossible for me to get published by a mainstream publisher. And certainly the content of this book takes a very obvious pop at governments and particularly the COVID scam. So there's absolutely no way. I didn't even attempt to approach a mainstream publisher for this one. So I am publishing it on Amazon, and it's essentially a self-publishing platform these days. But it still has to be reviewed. So if you never actually see it and you're unable to order it, it's because it hasn't passed muster with Amazon. But currently, it is due for release on the 4th of August.
Because I was reading there, Dr. Vernon Coleman is on Substack, and he was kind of getting a bit peeved the other day because he has published stuff on Amazon. And he said, look, there are no more options. It is so limited out there for anybody to publish that Amazon is this kind of only outlet. But then, of course, the criticism comes of like Amazon, of all the, I'm not sure if you'd even call it a publishing house, but of all the outlets, how could you choose Amazon? But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of choice.
There doesn't, and the same thing applies to Substack. All of the tech bros that we know of have been involved in the investment into Substack. Mark Andreessen, for example, who sort of joined at the hip with Elon Musk, is a big investor in Substack. I believe Peter Thiel also invested in the early days as well. So it's the case, in order to get reach, obviously, we do have to depend on publishing platforms. So you're between a rock and a hard place, really, because the other alternative, obviously, is to go to one of the mainstream publishers, but they tend to be owned by the big media empires, so Murdoch and so on owns a host of publishing houses. And in Media House, for example, that publish a lot of newspapers, also have publishing arms. So it's really impossible. And of course, you then have to go through the gatekeepers as well, the agents and the commissioning editors in order to. And of course, somebody like me, a middle-aged or even beyond middle age now.
Well, we don't know the cutoff point now. I'm sure it's well reduced.
Man is unlikely to get published anyway these days, so it's practically impossible. So I thought, well, the other thing was that I did about back in middle of 2019, I always had an idea that I would quite like to, I probably like yourself, I would imagine. I have started a number of books over the years and never finished them. And I decided to go and do a course, a 2-week residential creative writing course at Cambridge. And that was in 2019, August 2019. And of course, all the hell was let loose. And then, but I was, even during 2020, I was still in full-time employment. Towards the end of 2020, that ebbed off, and I've been doing less and less sort of consulting work that I had been doing up to that point. So I was suddenly given quite a lot of time. So my wife nudged me and says, "What about that bloody course you did? Are you ever going to produce a book?" So she threw down the gauntlet, and this is the result of it. So having gone through the process of writing it, and it's been written all over the place, by the way. I've been traveling quite a lot over the course of this year, and I wrote quite a bit of it in Greece. And I also included some of the sort of the landscape, if you like, of the places where I wrote it, and that has made its way into the book. So you'll notice references to Greece and some of the Greek islands, because that's literally where I was writing the thing. So having gone through that process and committing to, a writing regimen, I was writing 1,000 words a day, typically, over a course of about 5 or 6 months, and got sort of roughly to the end. I've just now gone through, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, the process of editing the thing. And of course, then I was left with the choice, what the hell do I do? What platform do I put it on? So I could have published it in serial form on Substack, but I thought, let's get it out on Kindle and paperback via Amazon and see where it goes. It may be that people think that there's legs in it. Some of the characters, I think, have legs in that they could, carry the plot, if you like, through to a sequel or even a trilogy. So, but it remains to be seen how receptive people are to some of the ideas contained in the book, and how responsive they are to the characterization. As you know, as an author sitting alone, you have no idea sometimes how people will react. I did, though, have an editor who read the thing start to finish, pre-edit. And he loved it, and he's a teacher of media studies, so it did kind of give me the impetus to sort of edit the thing and get it published. So we've been through hell over the last few weeks getting that process finished.
Well, it's such an important thing to try and get a hold again of some kind of a voice where we are allowed to speak, because we know what has happened over the past few years. The voices who have said, "Hey, I'm not comfortable with what's going on," and who have tried to warn people about the COVID-19 injections. They're not even vaccines. Who are trying to talk about the excess deaths. Who are trying to say, "Hey, listen, there was no pandemic and there was no sign of any contagious virus." All those voices have been quieted. If you walk into a bookshop these days, as a mother, I'm always looking at books for kids. It's all black magic, I notice. It's all black magic and very, very dark stories, scary stories, monsters, demons. Demonology is absolutely everywhere. And spells and witches, and a big one for kids for me is they're trying to make out witches are, just misunderstood. That's another big one. And it's just so off-putting going into shops. I went in the other day, they had Ryan Tubridy, who would have been RT's highest paid broadcaster. He got outcast. He's in the UK now. He's on, I think it's Virgin Radio, because of a secret payment scandal. But, he was one of the main drivers of the scamdemic in Ireland. And there his picture was in Eason's recommending, he does this book podcast, and it was his recommendations. And I just thought how insulting to all of us people whose voices have been quieted, how insulting to put this man's face up in Eason's bookshop with his book recommendations after everything that has happened. And it would just turn you off buying books. So there is this huge thirst. You still want to read, you still want to lose yourself in a good fiction novel. But it's knowing that the whole publishing world is so rotten to the core right now, and people getting book deals, you'd nearly question them. You'd be like, why did you get it? And we see, like, even Dr. Tony Houlihan, he's got a book deal after everything he's done. And who was there at his book launch? Only Ryan Tubridy was at his book launch. So it is this kind of circle who are allowed to speak and give their book recommendations and get, the top billing in the likes of Eason's. So it's just, as you say, it's a matter now of marketing, because marketing is so big when it comes to publishing a book and getting the word out. And again, you're kind of confined to the fringes, I suppose.
Well, yes, I am. Although I am lucky in the respect that, my career was in marketing and communications. And in fact, the book is about a series of characters who are in marketing and communications as well. And therefore, I suppose I can bring my particular skills to that. I've written for a living for most of my life. Typically, I was writing content for technology companies to help them peddle their particular wares. But the opportunity here is for me to write about what I know, because I worked in technology and I worked in Silicon Valley, and I've worked with the tech bros. In fact, that was the working title for the book, incidentally, but my wife didn't really like that title. But it is very much a book about the tech bros, obviously about Musk and the social media gangsters, and the media organizations as well, dominated by technology companies these days. So I do start with a slight advantage, but you're right. It's very difficult. To an extent, I'm going to be communicating the virtues of the book to people who already know me or know of me. The challenge is to get the message out much further than that. But we'll see. But it's wonderful that you're the first podcaster from the freedom movement, if I can call it that, to interview me about this. The book isn't officially launched yet, so I'm very grateful for that, and hopefully I'll be continuing this process as well to get the message out. But the message is very clear, and what you said earlier about the fact that we only have a very limited Overton window to peer through as far as published material is concerned, certainly mainstream published material is concerned. I think there is a requirement on all our parts to challenge that as much as we can, even if it's only in a tiny way. And this is my tiny way. This is my creative effort to produce characters who are interesting, who have interesting things to say about the circumstances that we have all been in over the last 5 years. And that's very much what the book is about. It's about people who have been as appalled as we were. I'm talking here about the characters, at the loss of liberty, about lockdown, about enforced vaccination, about schools being closed and churches being closed, and all of that. And it's kind of their response to that. And the characters represent an amalgam of people that I have met, like you and others in the wider movement, not just here in Ireland, but across the UK and in the States as well, and further afield, who have reacted in the ways that we have to all of this. And I think that's a growing cohort. I genuinely do believe that. I think that the fact that, for example, people didn't get their booster jabs, I think the message was beginning to leach through that there was a scam going on, that the vaccines didn't work, that there was no virus, that it was simply a media virus. Those are the themes that I tried to convey in South of Market. And my challenge really is just to get the word out and hopefully get a few people to buy it and read it. And that, in fact, that's more important. I want people to read this thing and enjoy it, and it to act as an affirmation that other people held their perspectives on things.
Well, I mean, one thing I was so involved in, say, the mainstream media and knew every aspect of it and knew all the characters and know them. Well, I knew them more so than know them. But one thing I noted with the COVID scam, because it was such a crystallizing moment, was that people were more willing to hold on to their crummy careers rather than tell the truth. And if they told the truth, they could have saved lives. But that was the one: either hold on to your career and the lies, and that continues to this day. With people pretending there was a pandemic, pretending there was some scary virus doing the rounds. You got to hold on to that lie, and then you'll hold on to your job, and you're perceived to be quite safe. But then there were the ones who just would not sell out. It was so few people said, "I'm not selling out." You're selling your soul, like it's a soul contract. There, you got to be careful with that kind of thing. And there's real beauty in that. There's such beauty in those people. And I've actually fought with a whole load of them since. It's not that we all got on with each other, because it turned out we had loads of different ideas on things. But in that crystallizing moment in, say, 2021, 2022, 2023 even, for people to say, I'm not selling out. It might cost me my job. I might have no followers, might have no income, but I'm not selling out. And to get those voices now, I mean, the non-sellout voices, because we saw with the artists even, they'll speak up on the Palestinian question. They'll speak up on all those things because it's allowed. It's like kneecap. They're allowed to speak about it. But where were the rebels' kneecap? Where were they when people's human rights were being taken away from them? Where were the human rights lawyers when people's rights were being taken away from them? But we saw it with the art scene in particular, where you would have expected the artists. The artists aren't supposed to care so much about money. They're not supposed to have sold their souls. But the COVID scam exposed it all. It exposed that these people are highly, highly compromised. They'll put the job first. They'll put the followership first. They're going to put like social media followership as well, their audience numbers, because as I found out, even when I was doing Instagram, your career is tied into the amount of people who follow you. But I'm noticing it now with people who have started in on this new world, that the same crap is starting up again, that people are getting too attached to numbers, and it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, absolutely. And on your point about people hanging on to their careers, I have a certain sympathy for that. I think, even when lockdown happened in March 2020, I had a very lucrative contract. Well, it wasn't that lucrative, but at least it was paying me a decent income with the UK government. I was an advisor to the Department of Trade, and in the very, very early days, I wasn't quite sure how to react, as many of us weren't. We were being bombarded with all of this stuff. It didn't take me very long to cotton on to the fact that this was all a total scam. But initially, I didn't know how to react. And then I found myself in a situation where I wasn't able to say anything, essentially. I wasn't really able to shine in the role, because what I wanted to say was, why are we still locked up? Why are all my clients going to the wall? Why are they not getting any funding? Because you've locked them all down. You've essentially carved up the market so that only the big gorillas can make any money in this situation. You've anointed certain retailers who are allowed to stay open or semi-open. And all of these little shops are going to the wall, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized that actually I couldn't say any of these things, because if I did, I would lose my contract. And it was a government contract. So there was a very, very limited amount of things you could say in opposition, if you like. But I got to December 2020 and just couldn't stand it any longer. So it was at that point I resigned, that position. I was fortunate that I was able to, but there are many, and I still am in contact with civil servants, for example, who are still there and still having to pay lip service to all the nonsense And of course, we're now in the UK government into a totally different administration that's pretty much doing all the same things. So they have had to live a lie, in effect, the ones who do see through it all. But that's
well, you see, I do understand to a certain extent. Like, I don't have a mortgage now. If I had a big
yeah,
mortgage, and if I was tied into a whole load of financial contracts, let's say,
absolutely, yeah.
then very difficult, but it really does start to come in on you then, that you've compromised when you start compromising to this extent. And I definitely am I'm not totally feeling for them, because I think you can't really go along with this anymore, because you cannot pretend that those people who died in the nursing homes had COVID and that's how they died. And I think that pretense, you see, brings on the next thing. So then it brings on the need for, oh, well, we had to have injections then because they died of COVID, when we know they didn't. We have all the receipts. And I just think the journalist's job, like, the journalists were supposed to be the watchdogs. But what I had noted in all my years there was that it was the replacement of the journalist with presenters and media personalities, so very charming. Will laugh at all the right jokes and wear the lovely clothes and look great on camera, and you would have the audience eating out of their hands, but won't ask proper questions, won't ask the hard questions.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
that's
why they were paid the big bucks.
absolutely, and that's still happening. In terms of the UK media, we were presented with GB News as being some type of sort of alternative media source, and I've noticed, for example, Bev, what's Beverly's surname?
Bev Turner, is it?
Yeah, Bev Turner
Yeah.
has been now nominated as the GB News's American anchor, or whatever they're called. But she's been trooping around after Trump on his UK visit, and she's been seen to be the one who asks the difficult questions, for example, about inheritance tax and the farms and so on, which gave Trump the opportunity to witter about the fact that they don't do that type of nasty thing in America, or whatever it might be. But the one topic they don't talk about is Operation Warp Speed, or about the fact that Trump was front and center of the lockdown phenomenon, that the UK and America were joined at the hip in terms of implementing these policies, that Imperial College was advising Anthony Fauci, or that the day after the inauguration, we had the ex-CIA Larry Ellison announcing an extension of the mRNA vaccine program and using AI to develop new vaccines and all this nonsense. So we have all of that stuff essentially written off, whitewashed out of our history. And even the appointed media personalities who are supposed to be challenging the narrative are doing nothing of the sort. They're just arse-licking Trump. And it's extraordinarily disappointing, that we have nobody in the mainstream media who is able to keep their jobs and ask difficult questions. That era is gone. And again, that is what I've tried to convey in this book. March 2020 marked the end of the free media period. It marked the end of democracy. It marked the end of even the ability to have free will or agency. And that represented the most significant change in our lives that we will hopefully ever encounter. And it's like it didn't happen. And I don't understand what is going on, or what is it with these people that they are more obsessed with keeping their superannuated roles than challenging this disgusting narrative that's pouring out of both the US and UK and Irish administrations, and most of the West, in fact. So it's an utter mystery to me, and it represents a feeling in human nature that I will never understand. I could not have lived with myself continuing in my role as a mouthpiece for some little corner of UK government. But similarly, I cannot understand why media personalities can't challenge this newfound convention, because it's disgusting. It's utterly disgusting. And they've let themselves down so badly. No profession has let itself down more badly than journalism.
Yeah, I mean, I went into journalism. I studied it in DCU, spent 4 years studying it. I don't know where any of my former people who studied it with me or in any of the years, where are they? Like, where are their voices? Everything has become so corporatized, and people will do anything to protect their job or their status or their place because they're terrified of being called a conspiracy theorist. That's another big one, this fear of looking like Looney Tunes, when that is the whole point of being a journalist. But for me, one of the another kind of crystallizing moments was when Conor McGregor showed up in the Freemasons Hall, yeah, in Dublin city centre with Tucker Carlson, doing funny handshakes and making a little, the upside down, whatever it is, the triangle thing.
Mhm.
And I was so disappointed by the people who I thought who had spoken out actually about the scam. So you'd imagine, that they'd be a bit more wise. Would say they were saying things like, "Oh, they just accidentally booked the hall. It doesn't actually mean anything." Whereas somebody like me who spent 20 years in the mainstream media knows that hall is not booked out, right? It's never booked out. Nobody
Mhm.
ever goes in there apart from maybe culture night or something like that. But to hear the level of brainwashing again amongst people who are supposed to know better, um, making excuses and then saying, yeah, Conor McGregor, we could have him as president. I mean, this guy who wanted the military brought in during lockdowns, who only recently quoted himself, who only recently said on X that he had pumped money into buying ventilators with no irony. He didn't even understand that that's not a good thing. And then you have this chorus of people saying, this guy is going to come and save us. Along the lines of Trump is going to come and save us because he's been anointed by Trump.
Mhm.
And this is very, very worrying for me. So we have like Conor McGregor, we have the Tate brothers, again anointed by Trump. And this type of very low grade individual with very, very low moral settings, but also reflective of the audience, the people cheering them on. And I just think, God, are we out of the frying pan and into the fire? Like it's, where's the progress here?
Yeah, yeah. Tucker Carlson's been an odd one, and I
Mm.
read what you wrote at the time, and I noted your concerns, particularly around the mood music and the location and all of that. And I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Tucker Carlson is too sophisticated a player, really, not to understand that the choice of location and the choice of uh, spokesperson, if you like, is or interviewee, I should say, is uh, will not resonate. He has incredible reach and incredible influence, but I was kind of prepared to forgive him because he has departed from the MAGA movement to an extent, particularly over Israel. Um, and I thought, well, maybe he's going to be a good influence, a force for good, if you like, to sort of detoxify the Trump front bench. But then, of course, he goes and does that in Dublin, and I couldn't quite understand either what the hell was going on. You do, and one of the themes of my book is you never quite know who it is, particularly in the alternative media, and I suppose Tucker Carlson is a representative of that alternative media now. Who's handling them? I cannot believe that Tucker Carlson is necessarily dependent on selling, health food supplements or whatever it is, or VPNs that he's peddling on his show. I can't believe that that's the sole revenue stream that he's getting, from his show. So therefore, who is Tucker Carlson's handler? There are many, many of them, certainly in the alternative media, where if you follow the chain up high enough, you'll eventually come to a hedge fund or a venture capital firm or a major private equity organization that have huge amounts of money to spend on this type of thing. And of course, then you also have essentially the mafia in various guises operating as well. I think Trump is definitely tainted by that mafia. Um, we have it here, we have it in the UK. They go all over the place. We've got the Zionist mafia. We've got these various male-dominated brotherhoods. the Fabian Society on the left, etc. So you never quite know why it is that the booker has gone for one particular interviewee, what the
Well,
line
it
is
seems
going to
to
be,
be
and what the mood music is going to be.
it seems to be a satanic network. That's that's my finding across, a whole range. It seems to be very, very dark, and that's why we're seeing so much criminality. What about this fight between Trump and Elon Musk? I mean, are you buying it, or is this part
Nonsense.
of the theater?
It's all part of the theater. It's all utter nonsense.
Mm.
We know that Musk, for example, has been bankrolled in the past by Epstein sources. We know that Epstein was CIA. We know that, for example, Tucker Carlson's father was CIA. We know that Larry Ellison is CIA. And again, it's one of the strands of the book that there is a narrative that it's a satanic network, or it's a Fabian network, or it's a Soros network, or it's a hedge fund network. I think it's all of those things. And I think there's a lot of competing internecine interests in the elite and sort of intergenerational wealth. But the tendrils tend to always end up in the intelligence agencies. And to all intents and purposes, those intelligence agencies are the deep state. They are the gophers, the doers, the compromaters. And, they all have relations to the intelligence agencies in some way, and they have compromat on all of them. So they were all being funded by Epstein. They've all been compromised. We know that Trump has been compromised, that Clinton has been compromised, that Musk is almost certainly compromised. Musk didn't even really invest his own money when he was buying Twitter. It was the same cast of characters that that invested in X as invested in Twitter in the first place. And again, it's why I keep coming back to the tech bros. The Musk front bench team is pretty much composed of the usual suspect connections to that deep state network. You've got like people like Howard Lutnick of Cantor Fitzgerald, the lead tenant in the World Trade Center on 9/11. Cantor Fitzgerald being highly Zionist, very, very. In fact, Howard Lutnick was Jeffrey Epstein's next door neighbor at one point in New York. It's unbelievable how interconnected these people are. There is no way that they would allow some petulant argument in the White House happen. It is all going to be controlled. The media narrative was controlled during the COVID era. It's certainly going to be controlled in the post-COVID era, in the Trump 2.0 era. And Musk and Trump, that fallout is just utter nonsense. It's all about allowing them to nuance what MAGA represents. But the end game is pretty much the same end game as the Democrat government before it and the previous Trump administration. It's all the same policy direction. There is no difference whatsoever, and they know exactly what they want to achieve. And all of this nonsense as well, the little petulant fallouts between Trump and Starmer on the Trump UK visit. Again, all choreographed, all set up. And I think Starmer's days are almost certainly numbered, and I think they're setting that up. You would almost think that they're setting it up that the UK becomes so bereft of any direction and strategy that it almost becomes the 51st state. That Trump and his team can be seen to be the people who are going to steer the United Kingdom in the most appropriate technocratic direction, because only
people are crying out
achieve.
for it already. Like, this is the thing. When I note on this side, you start, asking people questions, you realize, oh my God, they actually do want a dictatorship, and they would like Trump to be their dictator. And there are Nazi elements, and they actually think that Adolf Hitler was all right and just misunderstood, and they wouldn't mind a bit of the old Adolf, And I think they're totally missing. They're totally missing all these psyops that have been laid right before us, and people are just eating the bait without asking any proper questions. I'm really shocked by the amount of people who are up for a dictatorship. Like we had Conor McGregor say, look, it's the end of politicians. Now, I get that completely because you look into Leinster House and there's barely any good one in there, right? Even over in the UK, Andrew Bridgen, he's even questionable, isn't he? He's even saying there was a virus and told people to take the injections, and he's like the best of them. I don't even think is he even a politician anymore. I can't keep up with them
No, no,
all.
he didn't get elected in the last in the general election.
Yeah, so he's not
I
even
think
in
his
there
vote.
anymore.
He had one of the biggest majorities, and this again is another incredible thing. He had one of the biggest majorities of any Conservative MP in North Leicestershire or somewhere, But he just lost the entire majority. You would have thought he would have had some type of personal vote, particularly if he was doing what he says he was doing. He was a maverick, a hero for the for liberal or libertarian thinking, and the fact that he was taking a stand against this terribly damaging vaccine. You would have thought he would have got a bit of a personal vote, given the fact that they've been voting for him for what, three terms.
Yeah.
He didn't. It just totally disappeared. His entire vote disappeared. I think he got like something like 2,000 votes. So what on earth? And now he's of course appearing everywhere on the so-called alternative media to spout off about the vaccine. And of course it's a lab leak theory, and he's very, very aligned with Kennedy. It's all nonsense.
Well, we're seeing it in Ireland too. So, there's the movement that's kind of swooped in to make sure voices like mine aren't going to be, less amplified, because I'm saying there was no virus and there was no pandemic. This is hugely problematic to those who want to manage the narrative. And they certainly don't want that coming out. But well, it's easy to note if you look around that they have created some new voices now that are very, middle ground. And that, of course, it's all about the middle ground. And no matter what we say, it's about, for the Irish, it's about Middle Ireland. It's about trying to convince those RTE viewers that, listen, you got conned, lads, and in a really bad way. And there was no need to wear a mask. There was no need to be locked down. There was no need for any of those measures. There was no need for Granny to be locked up in her room on her own in the nursing home and then bumped off with end of life medication and called COVID-19. There was no need for any of it. This is huge. So you can see why they want to curtail it or smear it or smother it, which of course is what they're trying to do. But I think they've caught themselves in a bit of a bind because the information is too compelling. For us looking at April 2020, you've got this one peak, 38% increase in excess deaths for this 1 month. And, as Dr. or Professor Rancor would say, look, that's not how a contagious virus doesn't operate like that. It doesn't operate in just one part of the country and not the other. It doesn't recognize county boundaries. So it is all there. The information's all there. Again, it's just being allowed to have the voice or being allowed to get the word out. And that is always going to be marketing, is always going to be the hard bit when you're up against a whole mainstream media. But when you've got the truth on your side, you become quite powerful.
Absolutely, and that's pretty much the theme that I was trying to develop in the book as well. The idea that this is a war between truth and lies. It's not even. It's even more fundamental than that. It's a war between truth and governments peddling lies. And that's even more worrying because people have become dependent. I used to appear on the radio all the time before 2020. And typically the line that I took was you can't trust governments. Governments are always attempting to steal our money, for example. They're always creating inflation, and they're also always printing money, for example. So essentially they're robbing money from our own back pockets. They print money because they're so utterly incompetent that they can't even run the economy based on the tax take. And that was kind of my line. But with March 2020 and COVID, And by the way, COVID wasn't the be all and end all. It wasn't. That's not where this story ends. COVID represented the point at which governments decided that they would stifle the truth and lie nonstop. Everything that they do and say is lies. Everything that their controlled media does and says is lies. And essentially that is what my book is about. Now, hopefully it's not depressing. Was in there.
Well, this is the crux. This is where, okay, so what have we learned? So we've learned that we cannot trust the media. So the media is easily bought, and there's not enough good people in there to do the right thing, that they're going to hold on to their jobs, their crummy careers, they're going to pay their mortgages, they're going to let people die. So we've learned that, okay? They're going to, look down the lens, and they're going to say it like they mean it, even though they know it's a lie, and even though they know it's going to cost lives. So really shoddy soul tests, they've failed. Media, out. Okay, so we cannot trust them. Our political class, you can't trust any of them. They're all easily bought, clearly compromised, blackmailed, you name it. They're up to their necks in it. They will lie and lie and lie. They're so greedy, they'll do absolutely anything for money and to hold on to their little crummy positions. So they're out, okay? So we've got political class, we've got the media, we've got the religious class, right? So they didn't stand up. They said nothing.
No, nothing.
Right? And so they allowed the churches to close. They turned away people. They went along with the stupid rules. They showed that they did not have the moral integrity to be able to discern, use the Christian discernment. They let everybody down. So we can see through them now that they didn't have the moral backbone to be able to stand up to all the lies and did nothing. All right. So again, another major, if these are like major institutions, then we have our university class. We've got all the professors. So the university class, again, they've failed the test completely. They've gone along with all sorts of nonsense. They've taken Bill Gates money. They've taken Epstein money. I mean, that's the big one, the Epstein science. We've now realized that most science, most of what we've learned is absolutely absurd, doesn't even make any sense, and is nonsense. The people we thought that were super intelligent, got all the awards, it turns out they're just telling us absolute nonsense, and that's why they got the awards. Royalty is down the toilet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a weird moment. They told people to get injected. They hang around with pedophiles. They give pedophiles silly awards and medals and all of that. And they don't acknowledge, when these guys get caught. And they're pretty gross. So we're pretty gross. Who am I missing? I'm like literally, we are in a crumbling civilization where all of those grand establishments are falling down around us. But where does it leave us is the question.
Well, I think it leaves us where we started. And, we all come into this world as, what is it? Shakespeare describes babies as a squalling, mewling, squawking, slimy things. Individuals, it's down to us. It's down to each individual taking a position, because collectively we're useless. We're no good when we appoint collectives to represent us. And that's why governments are utterly useless, because they're all bought. So therefore, and again, it's hopefully the message that comes out of my book, that it's down to us. It's up to us. To unashamedly rip off a technique that Ayn Rand used in Atlas Shrugged. I don't know if you've read Atlas Shrugged, but the main character, John Galt, is the book starts with John Galt being missing. He's essentially an entrepreneur and businessman who goes on strike because he's not able to achieve anything or innovate because of governments. And what I wanted to do was, with one of my characters, was to do a grand soliloquy. Essentially what it is instead of being a speech that is made in Atlas Shrugged, it's a podcast interview. So I make it 21st century, and but the opening line, or when my character in the book is asked the question, he's called, by the way, Mark Carlyle. When he's asked the question in the podcast interview, he uses the line that is used in Atlas Shrugged: "I love my life." That's what we're supposed to do. We have to love our lives. It's down to us. It's down to us. We have the responsibility to ourselves and to the people that we love to enjoy and love our lives. And we cannot let governments fuck them up. And that's what they've been doing. Governments have been fucking everything up, and we can't let it continue. And the only way we can stop it is to ignore them and to cut off the sources that they have available to us. Now, there is another strand in the book in that we did create, apparently, a new currency, a new money system called Bitcoin. And it was going to be some type of salvation. But of course, it's no salvation either, because it was almost certainly created by the same establishment as a hedge whereby the elite could step outside of the fiat financial system and make a fortune on the back of people like us who don't really hold much Bitcoin, because they didn't have any insider knowledge at the early stages of the creation of the currency. So they are doing everything that they can to feather their own nests. The only thing that we can do is to focus on our own fulfillment, our own lives, and ensuring that we sustain our families and the people that are around us that we love. And that will frustrate them more than anything. It's not going to be a revolution, because revolution is not going to happen. But what we can say is that you do not represent us. You do not influence our lives. We will do everything we can to undermine everything you try to do to us. And we can only do that at an individual level. We can't depend on any champions to do it for us.
No, and I think it's a really bad idea. And I'm totally with you, because any group you're in is going to be infiltrated at some point if it's going to, have some kind of leverage. But you can do so much. The one person with the big gob can do so much by sticking a stick in the spokes. And yes, it's having a kind of the moral gumption to do it, caring enough. It's like, do you care enough about your life? Do you care enough about your children's lives and the legacy you're going to leave behind? Does it matter enough to you? Or are you going to live a small little life and depend on your pension and curl up and be depopulated? Allow yourself to be depopulated by some guy in a suit, And that's kind of where we're at now. And there's some form of movement, but my concern is to see how easily people are corralled. Like, I would say the Brigitte Macron thing, Candace Owens saying, well, Brigitte Macron's a man, and then providing no evidence. But so I'm I'd look at that and say, well, where's the evidence? I don't care if she's a man, right? If she's a man, she's a man. Great. That's a big story. Let's run with it. Expose it. I'd be all for it. Expose, if it's true. I've found people saying, oh, who cares? It's, it's a bit of crack and you could just call her a man. It's like, well, no, it has to be true. Like, it has to be bloody well true, because if it's not true, there's no point in going along with it. I sat through that whole transvestigation and I said, well, I don't see any evidence. None of this stuff is actually passing the mark. Where is the evidence that this woman is a man? Where is that one going? Do you think that one's another big distraction tactic?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And again, I happen to believe that woke was a creation. Again, it was masterminded, because it meant that, for example, that Trump 2.0 had a whole host of different policy agendas that he could implement. I would even go as far as to say that possibly net zero too, possibly net zero as well. Because now we have, Trump wants to drill and drill, and he did his big posturing scene about anti-windmill thing when he was up at Turnberry yesterday. And of course, we're going to get probably some type of turnaround from the Starmer administration on the whole net zero thing. So I think that there is clearly the recreation of the right and the recreation of MAGA as an overthrow of woke, but again, no mention of an overthrow of the COVID tyranny and what created the COVID tyranny, namely Trump in the first place. So it's like they create narratives that can be debunked very, very safely. And the debunking, and you remember that Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson and stuff said damn all about COVID, but banged on about woke and trans and stuff ad infinitum, because that was a
Oh, yeah.
nice
And we'll talk
safe
about
domain.
the threat of Islam without saying, well, who's let the door open?
Yeah,
Those guys, you cannot trust them at all.
yeah. But also there's a handy agenda item here in terms of the influx of immigrants across the border in America, and of course the boat people here. That's a handy policy plank upon which to argue that we need to implement digital IDs, and that could well have been that whole. In fact, even possibly the orchestrated program of illegal immigration into the UK along the Kent coast and so on. That could all have been orchestrated by Palantir, which has probably got most to gain from a digital ID scheme. If the UK proceeds with its Palantir-based Brit card, every other Western nation will probably follow suit. Although it was encouraging yesterday that Palantir stock price fell 3.3%. That's one.
3.3 though. You'd wonder when you see the
Yeah,
33
wouldn't you?
in there. There's a scam. They're nudging at each other and winking. Now, Jeff, we're nearly near the hour mark. I'll leave you to your afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. So tell us, when is the book out and how do we buy it and support you?
Well, it's out in just about a week's time, hopefully, if everything goes to plan. And it'll be available in Kindle format and paperback. And I'll publish the link to the Amazon page link once it's live. So hopefully in about a week's time. So anybody who's interested in buying it, just make sure that you follow me either on Twitter. I'm at Jeffrey Peel, or on my Substack, which is thenewera.uk, which is below my name there on the screen. And I'll ensure that you get the link to the book ordering page. So it's as simple as that. And it's not very expensive. So
how much is it going to be?
I think it's $12.99 sterling.
Great.
So something similar in euros.
Well, Jeff, I'm so impressed with you that you've actually managed to write a full book, finish it, and get it to publishing stage. This is amazing. So well done. We look forward to reading it. I'm off to France for a bit, so no, I probably won't. I'll have to read it when I get back. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. And as always, your insights, they are so very much appreciated at this crazy time where people aren't being straight because they're bought and they have agendas, and you can always catch them, they all say something funny, after a while it kind of catches in your ear and you're like, why do they say that? But I don't get that with you, Jeff. So thank you for being you, and the best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much, Aisling, and have a fabulous holiday. And remember, just keep on loving that life.
Yes, that is so important. Keep on, because sometimes you can be paralyzed by all of this, and I can be the first to be paralyzed with my mouth open going, what are we going to do? But no, we have to crack on with life, keep enjoying ourselves and making beautiful moments. All right, Jeff, take care.
All the best, Aisling. Thanks very much indeed.